Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you and anyone who's tuning in today. I am so excited to be here to have your attention for the next Power Story Presents speaker series. Thanks for joining us. If you can't tell yet, I am super pumped because I'm so excited to hear from our special guest today. Four phenomenal women who advocate for young readers by creating amazing work. The topic of our panel today is Spine-Tingling Tales, reclaiming the supernatural and kid lit. Our authors have a few things in common. Number one, they each made their triumphant debut this past year. Number two, each of their books capture readers with spine-tingling mystery, adventure, friendship, courage, and so much more. Number three, they each admit not to be fans of horror. Real facts. What I know for sure is that their books will live on with readers long after the last page. Our first author, Daka Hermon, was born in Tennessee and spent her childhood huddled under a blanket reading with a flashlight and writing fairy tale and fantasy stories. And hide and seek was one of her favorite games to play with the neighborhood kids. It was this creepy chant that gave her the idea to write her debut novel, Hide and Seeker. In this parallel universe, the seeker keeps children hostage, feeding off their fears. This dark nail-biter set in a small Tennessee town weaves a creepy spin on a childhood game that quickly slips into a Stephen King-esque type of horror. Deka creates a chilling world perfect for budding fans of horror and Stranger Things that explores grief, the true meaning of friendship, overcoming your fears, and the value of believing in yourself. India Hill Brown is an author with a passion for writing, reading, and all things literary. Growing up, she was easily frightened, but after getting hooked in the Goosebumps series, she prided herself on finishing the books, even through the scary parts. A spine-chilling ghost story, The Forgotten Girl introduced India as a promising new voice in children's literature. Both historically and culturally relevant, Brown's thoughtful story explores the legacy of racism with a historical twist. In North Carolina, Iris and her best friend seek out one night to play in just fallen snow, only to stumble upon the abandoned grave of Avery Moore, who died in 1956 at the age of 11. R.L. Stine, creator of Goosebumps, said of The Forgotten Girl, quote, "This ghost story gave me chill after chill. It will haunt you." We agree. There are 3 rules of Ghost Squad. Be prepared, respect the dead, and always have a cat. Claribel Ortega delivers both a spooky and delightfully sweet debut novel inspired by her folklore of her own Dominican heritage. Claribel's emphasis on Latinx food, love, and family gives the story its distinctive warmth and spirit. Shortly before Halloween, Lucely Luna and her best friend Sid cast a spell that accidentally awakens malicious spirits, wreaking havoc through St. Augustine. Together, they join forces with Sid's witch grandmother, Babette, with her tubby tabby Chunk, to fight the haunting head-on and reverse the curse to save the town if it's too late. Just like Claribel, charming, funny, and fierce, readers will want to be best friends with Lucely, Sid, and obsessed with Chunk. But wait, there's more. It was recently announced that Ghost Squad is soon to be a major motion picture. Academy Award-winning director Brenda Chapman is set to write and direct, and Scholastic Entertainment will co-produce the film. Last and never least, moderating our session today is Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. She's associate professor in the Division of Literacy, Culture, and International Education at UPenn. She's written and co-authored more than 24 articles. She's also published 2 books, including The Dark Fantastic, Race and the Imagination from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games. Her expertise on race and representation in children's and young adult literature has been sought after nationally and internationally. Many of us call her a champion and a fearless advocate in the kid lit community. She's also a Trekkie at heart and frequent Comic-Con attendee. Welcome, everybody. So, Deka, take us away.
Hi, everyone. I am Deka, and I wrote Hide and Seeker. And the inspiration behind this novel was my love and fear of the game. Playing as a kid with some of my friends, we had like the best time. And I remember that there was a chant that we said that, and it's the actual chant in the book. And that sort of creeped me out, and no one knows exactly where that the chant came from. And so I started thinking about the chant and wondering where it came from, why it was so creepy. And I started thinking more about the game itself and how you're basically hunting kids for sport. and wondering why we were actually playing the game. And so I started writing it. Again, like Lizette said, I wasn't a big fan of horror, and I thought I was writing an action adventure and something like Goonies. But then it some kind of way became a horror novel, which I love. But the basis of the novel is, I think, facing your fear and getting over loss and seeking things, which I think all kids do. And I had a wonderful time writing it, and I hope it is fun and terrifying to kids. And thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm India Hill Brown, and I'm the author of The Forgotten Girl. I was inspired to write this story by a cemetery in my hometown. I'm a Carolina girl, a South Carolina native. There is a cemetery in our hometown called Elmwood Cemetery, and it was abandoned and once segregated. We actually have family members buried there, my great aunt and my uncle. And when we would visit, it would just always be creepy and kind of overgrown because it was abandoned. And actually one day we went, my grandmother told me that their gravestones were facing forward, but over time they turned to face each other. And you can actually still see it. And I was like, that is so scary. It would make a perfect ghost story, or the setting of a perfect ghost story. And even though I'm so afraid of like horror stories and stuff, I thought that it was just something to write. Avery, our ghost, is actually buried in an abandoned and segregated cemetery. And I just wanted to kind of get in the head of a spirit that was long forgotten and how vengeful she would be. But the story is really one of friendship, forgiveness, family, and history.
I'm Claribel. I'm the author of Ghost Squad. And Ghost Squad is the story of 12-year-old Lucely Luna, who's right here, and her best friend Sid, who's right here, and a fat cat named Junk, who's right here, and Sid's grandmother, Babette, who's not on the cover, but I think she should get her own version because she's everyone's favorite. And they have to save the city of St. Augustine from these malicious spirits that are taking over the town. And Ghost Squad was inspired by a couple of different things. It's based on folklore from Dominican Republic that says that fireflies are the souls of your lost loved ones who are watching over you. So it's sort of a story that we tell one another to comfort ourselves, like during grief. It just, I feel like everyone's story here has something to do with like loss and grief. It's just really interesting. And then also, I wrote it in part because I actually lost my own brother to cancer, and we used to catch fireflies when we were little. And this story sort of came full circle. I've only ever heard the folklore of fireflies told from my relatives, like from my grandmother and like older relatives. I had never seen it written down anywhere, and I thought it was really important to put it in a story, and really beautiful. It just sounds like something that's from a fantasy story already, right? So I wanted to preserve it. I wanted to have it in a book so that, you know, future generations can read it. And also because I really feel that our ancestral stories are tools that we're given to deal with life. And this one in particular is something that is a tool to deal with grief. And it's a way to comfort ourselves during loss, and especially kids too, because there's so much loss going on everywhere, like on TV, on the news, they can't avoid it. So I felt it was really important to write something like this, and also have something that was like fun to best friends, like two Black girls like on bikes having adventures, something I never got to really read growing up. And so that's just some of the inspiration behind Ghost Squad. That's why I wrote it.
Thank you all. I also love, like you said, Claribel, and a few of you, how these novels, middle grade novels in particular, explore, they're interwoven with grief and loss and building friendships and how to overcome that, and also discuss it openly through our history and through family. And also I just have to give a shout out for all of your covers. They're so beautiful, design, creepy, fun, you know, represent Black and brown children. I just think they're phenomenal. So I want to give a shout out to the cover designers, and I just love that the package for your books also just draws in readers from the get. So we're gonna go a little bit deeper into this conversation. I'm gonna pass the mic to Ebony.
Thank you so much, Lizette, and thanks so much for having me with these amazing authors, perfect for Halloween and the harvest season. And I just think all three of these reads are ones that are valuable for our young people. Claribel. Ghost Squad is jam-packed with a lot of pop culture references. We love the Goonies reference,
Yes.
especially Chunk the Cat. Can you talk about what other TV shows or movies influenced Ghost Squad and why?
Sure. So I will have to say, originally, if I didn't mention this TV show, I would be lying. Are You Afraid of the Dark was probably like the thing that like catapulted my love, like that, and like Stephen King novels really catapulted my love for anything like scary, and probably like too scary for me at that age. So definitely Are You Afraid of the Dark? The idea of like these ghost stories and kids dealing with these like supernatural scary things. And then things like Hocus Pocus, for sure. There is a huge scene in Ghost Squad where there's a party in sort of like the town hall where the whole, like everyone's there. And that was super inspired by Hocus Pocus. That was like my nod to Hocus Pocus because it's one of my favorite Halloween movies. Also things like Halloween Town, the Goonies definitely, and like anything that was like scary in like the 80s and 90s. We had really scary TV shows as kids, and like Return to Oz, for example, I remember really scarred me, but I loved watching it.
We certainly see that in Ghost Squad. Such a cool story. Deka, your background was in working in entertainment for kids in LA for the incredible Kenan and Kel show, which I certainly watched. How did your background in writing for kids for the screen help you write Hide and Seeker?
I worked on all that and Kenan and Kel, and I love those shows. And I have to just tell you, it was just like the best time in my life. And I think it prepared me a little bit because, again, since I'm a big scaredy cat, I learned a lot about comedy with working on those shows. And so I like to introduce a little bit of comedy and levity in my shows so kids aren't that scared. And I think also because I was working on these shows that had an ensemble cast, that helped me understand how I was going to write books where there are lots of kids. In this book, there are like the main friends themselves are like 5 or 6. And then there are other kids, and every kid needs to be distinct and have their own voice. So then watching how they did it for all that, and Kenan and Kel, and how they were completely different characters. Everybody had their lane that they had. And then that allowed me to sort of use that as I was writing and creating characters. And I'm a big fan of physical comedy. Not like gross comedy, but I love those physical comedy moments. And so I was able to introduce some of that in my novel as well, to again break up a little bit of the spookiness and have kids laugh and be scared at the exact same time.
That's so exciting. I just think readers are going to love the comedy ensemble aspect of Hide and Seeker. And so, India, your story mixes traditions of the genre with historical aspects which have been lost or whitewashed throughout history. How did you start drafting your story, and what kind of research did you do?
With The Forgotten Girl, like I said, the cemetery that it was based on is in my hometown. So it really just started off with visiting that and looking at the different markers, because there are markers around the cemetery that explain like how it used to be segregated and how it was named after an influential Black man in the community. And you can actually see the division of the cemeteries, how they were segregated. And it's actually kind of sad because the side that was whites only is like super pristine, super clean, and it looks like it's kept up regularly, whereas Elmwood is still kind of, it's still not where it could be. And something else that I actually watched to kind of prepare for The Forgotten Girl. was the 80s movie Poltergeist. It's my mom's favorite movie, and it's one of the few scary movies that I can watch. And if you think about Poltergeist and how the house was built on like an ancient burial ground, it's kind of the same kind of aspects, I guess. And then the suspense of Poltergeist is what I love. It's like that slow draw, like creepy things are happening over here, creepy things are happening over here, and then there's like this big blow up at the end of just everything going on. And that's kind of something that I guess I absorbed over time after seeing that movie so many times. And you can definitely see that in The Forgotten Girl.
I love it. Poltergeist so infected the popular imagination in the 80s.
Yes.
I have a question for all the authors on today's panel. What are some of the ways beyond what you've just told us that you put a piece of yourself into the books?
There's so much of my upbringing and me in Ghost Squad. One of the things that I wanted to make sure of was I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I grew up in the South Bronx. There were a lot of problems that like my parents and older people were having that I didn't quite understand, but I always felt like I wanted to do something to help, and I felt very helpless. And I remember that feeling as a child of wanting to be able to create a solution for things that I really didn't get. And that's what Lucely is doing like throughout the whole book, right? She's trying to fix this thing that feels bigger, like too big for her, not just, you know, malicious spirits, but also she's about to lose her home because her dad can't pay his bills. A lot of my Dominican culture is in it. When Lucely greets her elders, she says Sion, papi, which means Sion is it's an abbreviation of bendición, which means blessings. So she's asking for her blessings every time she sees her dad. We have to do that or we get in big trouble. So it was like, if I don't put that in, it won't be authentic. So little things like that. And then for the two best friends, Sid and Lucely, I would say like they're the two parts of me. Lucely is like the anxiety part of me who's like worried about everything and like a soft, sweet baby angel. And then Sid is like the part of me that feels like she could do anything. They're very different, but together they make a really great team because they balance each other out.
So I think mine is going to be sort of similar to what Claribel said too, like growing up in Tennessee in a Black neighborhood. I really never saw that experience in a book that I read. And I sort of wanted to capture what that was like, and having these group of friends who supported each other. And Justin is a little bit, I think Justin, out of all the characters in the book, is a little bit of me. Justin's mom died of cancer. My mom died of cancer. And it's this whole journey to get past the loss and the grief of it, knowing that it's always there, and having that anxiety and dealing with it, but then also having, you know, these supportive friends around that really try to uplift you and encourage you and help you through things. And I also really wanted to have like Black kids in general see themselves as heroes and see themselves meeting challenges and overcoming challenges and depending on each other to do that, because I feel like growing up, I did have this close-knit group of friends in the neighborhood where we were out running around all the time. And if something happened, we had each other's backs and we would support and take care of each other and watch over each other. And so I sort of wanted that experience shown.
I think for me, it's definitely very similar to Claribel, where there are little pieces of me in different characters of the story. With Iris, she's feeling this intense frustration that she's feeling forgotten in different aspects of her life at school and at home. And there's one scene in particular where she sees that she's in the Beta Club, and the Beta Club was actually on the television getting awarded, and she was not even invited to go. That kind of happened to me when I was in the 5th grade. I won this like school-wide writing award, and the teacher or the principal forgot to tell me that I was representing my school at like the statewide ceremony. And then when my mom brought it up, he was just kind of like, oh, we'll mail you your certificate. Like, it was just kind of like this thing that we felt was very racially charged as well because of the school that I was at. And that really hurt my feelings as a child. And it was something that Iris is kind of going through. And also with Iris, she's very headstrong. She really goes to get what she wants. She really is like, I don't care. I know I'm breaking rules. but I have to do what I want. So that's like the ambitious part of me, but there's also Daniel, who's extremely cautious and easily frightened. And that's the other part of me. And these two sides always fight each other. And with the grandmother, Sugar, she is kind of superstitious, a little kooky, and that reminds me of my own grandmother. So, and my family is very tight and close knit, and you can kind of see those strong family aspects in the story as well.
How did you try to play with the tropes and conventions of the spooky middle grade genre in your stories?
For me, I feel like it's suspense. I think that is scarier, even more so than jump scares sometimes. The build up, like you feel like something is not right, or you feel like a little bit uneasy. I feel like that is the jumping point to like any scary story. And it's hard to convey jump scares in novels. So I really wanted to focus on the suspense. I remember when I was little and I would see a pile of clothes in the corner or something at night and the light would be off, and I would think to myself, like, what is that? Like, is that really a pile of clothes? Is it a monster over there trying to get me?
For me, it's pretty much the same thing. From the fear of the unknown is scarier to me than actually seeing like the monster or whatever that's supposed to terrorize you. So I tried to play on that, where again, like there's something out of the corner of your eye, or you see a shadow, or you hear a strange sound, and that sort of builds the suspense of like, what is it and when is it coming? And also like sort of the ticking clock of like knowing that you have to do something or something's going to happen to you. So you know you only have a certain amount of time to achieve your goal.
So I have some similarities in my book. Definitely the ticking clock. They have to get everything done before the full moon on Halloween, or the evil spirits take over the town. So you already have that sort of like breathing down your neck. Also, Chunk, the cat, is sort of like foreshadowing whenever she's scared and she's like, I don't want to go in there. And they have to bribe her with string cheese, which relatable. But for me, trope wise, I really tried to like use the inspiration of like movies and stuff that I loved growing up and sort of like translate them for like what like two little like brown and black girls would how they would deal with these kinds of things. And like they still have to really try to get around like their parents, and like thankfully they have Babette, the grandmother, who's along for the ride. So she to me was like Doc from Back to the Future. I love the trope of like the older, wiser person sort of being like, I'm also gonna come on the adventure and I know what I'm doing, so just let me handle this.
I love that family element in the stories. I mean, that's so important for our cultures. And I think that is critical and key to multicultural and diverse children's literature. Why do you believe kids gravitate to spooky, scary horror stories?
I wondered that myself, so I asked my nephews, and he explained to me that it was like the adrenaline rush. He likes that rush of being afraid, and especially if he's with his friends and they're watching something scary, but he likes that fear of that rush he gets. But I think also it's about feeling like they're in control, because they can also close the book, stop watching the movie. And so I think there's that rush, but you're in control. And also maybe the monsters or the bad guys represent some kind of problem or issue in their lives, and they defeat the monster at the end. So they also are winning whatever battle that they're facing.
I completely agree with Deka. I think that it's much for the same reasons that I write things like this, because I feel like I can confront the things that scare me in a safe setting. When I was younger, I was a lot more like fearless. I could watch scary things. Now, getting older, it's harder for me to watch all of these things and read those scary stories for whatever reason. But when I'm writing things, it gives me an opportunity to think about the things that scare me and to work through them in a place where I feel secure. And to think about those things, like Ghost Squad is a really fun adventure, but at the end of the day, it's about grief. I'm talking about the loss of a family member when I'm talking about the Fireflies, and I'm talking about a thing I wish I had, which is their ghosts still around me so that I can talk to them. So I think horror for that reason is such a powerful thing, because it can really help you to look at things that have happened or things that you're afraid of in a setting that is sometimes implausible. So it feels like you're okay, but still you're coming up against and you're confronting these very real things.
I think that it's also about a feeling of accomplishment, or that's like one of the reasons I read Goosebumps and stuff when I was younger, because I was such a like frightened kid. When I did get to the end of a Goosebumps book, I felt like, oh, I did it. Like I conquered a small fear of mine, which is reading something spooky. But I think that feeling of accomplishment, it just gives you like that little spike of bravery that I just felt like I didn't have as a child. And also, I think escapism, even though you are reading something kind of spooky, it is like a way to kind of close the door on any like real life obstacles you're going through, and just kind of focusing in on something that is wildly unbelievable and just something that can just be contained in a story.
Wow, I'm learning so much about horror writing for middle grades, because horror is not my favorite genre either, because of disbelief or suspending disbelief. And it's like, okay, monster. So revisiting your childhood one last time, when you were kids, what were some of your favorite books to read? We've talked a bit about Goosebumps. Were there others?
Loves the Babysitter's Club. Not horror, but I love the Babysitter's Club. I read The House on Mango Street probably like 500 times. It was the only other book that I could find with like a Latinx lead, even though like she was Mexican, it was Chicago, it was like completely different. But I was like, hey, they say Spanish words, like me. So definitely that. Sweet Valley High also. I had older sisters, so like everything they were reading, I was like, I'm just gonna grab this and read it when I'm not supposed to be. And Stephen King, I graduated very quickly from like Goosebumps. There was like no in between for me. And also like Daniel Steele, I don't know, it was just like whatever was in my house, I was reading it.
For me, I would say like towards the earlier elementary school years, I loved Junie B. Jones. I think that was like my first like big girl chapter book. It was Junie B. Jones and her big fat mouth, and I could relate to that like so much. And I loved historical fiction in like the Dear America series, because I love the aspect of like a diary being kept in like a different time period of time. And I loved the Babysitter's Club. So I love those.
I think for me, I was really big on comics growing up. So I was reading a lot of like the Marvel comics, Star Wars comics, basically any comic that I could find. And also some Goosebumps books. I loved the Narnia books. I was really big on that. Also Nancy Drew. I liked the mysteries of them, and again, trying to solve things, and they could be a little spooky, but not too spooky for me. Anything I could get my hands on. So like Lord of the Flies, like, you know, like Langston Hughes poetry, like whatever I just saw, I wanted to read. So it was a little bit of everything.
If you could have readers take away one thing from each of your books, what would it be?
I would have them take away, your worth is not determined by if or how people see you. That's something that Iris has to learn in the story. She feels like, oh, if I do this, then everyone will notice me and it'll be this big thing. And I wanted her to kind of understand before she gets the recognition that she wanted, that she was still like so valuable without everyone having to notice. Like they were eventually going to catch on. And that is something that drove the ghost Avery just so mad, because she went so long without being recognized, even though she did something so incredible.
For me, I think I would want them to know that it's okay to not be okay. I think in this book, Justin is dealing again with the grief and the loss of his mother and trying to pretend like he's okay when he's really not okay. And then the monster, the seeker in the book, plays on everyone's fears. And that's his fear of like dying or forgetting his mother. So I would want them to know that we all have fears and we all have challenges, but you can overcome those things. and you're okay with not being okay and dealing with it. And also then to also know that you have friends and family around that you can lean on and you can talk to and support, and that if you do come up against these challenges, you can be your own hero.
For Ghost Squad, I would say I would want people to take away that family looks a lot of different ways. Lucelli starts off the story sort of really wanting for her mom to come back because her mom abandoned her and her father when she was younger, and she wants to feel like her family is whole again. But she starts to learn that her family is whole and that her family is more than just like her and her dad. Like her best friend is her family. Her Firefly spirits are certainly her family, but also the friends that she has and the people that care about her in her community. So all family is valid. Found family is super valid. And everyone's family looks different, but that doesn't make them any less. There's no perfect sort of unit. I'm totally not in control of my characters sometimes. Like Babette had such a smaller role in the very beginning, and then she just like exploded, and she's like, I'm actually coming along too. So just let things happen and unfold the way that they need to, and sometimes that makes like for the best stories when they just sort of tell themselves.
Well, that ends my Q&A. So I will turn it back over to Lizette.
That was an amazing conversation. Obviously, you guys were incredible. We learned so much more about each of your books and who you are as people, and even future things coming. I think we all discover, we know for sure that definitely your books have creepy and suspenseful elements, but equally important, they strike the right balance, right? They each allow us to exercise and stretch our imaginations and work through emotions. And I really think that's one of the coolest and greatest gifts you can give any reader. So congratulations and thank you for that. Speaking of gifts, each of our authors' books, including Ebony's, are available wherever books are sold. Go support your local indie or local library, and be sure to follow these amazing women on social media. They're incredible. Thank you for joining us today. Follow Power Story Speaker Series other events, and there'll be more coming up. Thank you, Deka, India, Claribel, and Ebony. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.